It's time for another Dice Tower review with John Richard.
Howdy gamers, greetings from Indianapolis, Indiana, the gaming capital of the world. It's time for another board game review with me, Indiana John. Today we're taking a look at Deus. It's designed by Sébastien Dujardin and published by Pearl Games and Asmodee. Now this game made quite a splash at Essen 2014 and is just now available in the United States, so I was happy to get a copy of it. This is a game of hand management where you're going to be using cards in your hand to be able to put buildings on a board, and then the way that those buildings interact and the way that your cards interact is the way you're going to score points and get victory in this game. So it's a good old-fashioned Euro game, but maybe not quite old-fashioned. It does some things kind of new, and it also has some extremely poor choices in graphic design and color selection. So we'll take a look at that in a minute, but let's take a look at the setup and gameplay of Deus and see if we can answer that most important gamer question: is it fun? So this is a three-player setup of Deus, and the board consists of these rounded off hex tiles that you're going to put into a specific configuration based upon the number of players. This is a standard three-player setup. There's a total of 7 of these in the game, and there's also some sort of funky setups that are in the back of the rule book. So there's a lot of replayability as far as how this board is set up. These are even double-sided. The only rule when you place these together is that these barbarian villages, which are the kind of brown squares here, brown spaces, they cannot be adjacent. Other than that, you're pretty much good. Then after you placed all the hexes out, then you're going to put victory points into each of the barbarian villages equal to the number of spaces that surround that barbarian village. So for example, this one has 6 spaces around it, you're going to put 6 victory points. This one only has 3 surrounding it, so it'll only get 3. That's pretty much the entire setup of the board. Then you'll have piles of money, piles of resources, piles of these temples. But this is really only about half of the game. The other half of the game is going to happen with the card play and everybody's personal play area. So let's take a look at how that's set up. So this is your player board in Deus. You're going to get this little board here that will hold your buildings that you're going to be putting onto the board. There's ships, production buildings, science, civil buildings, and military. There's a slot over here for temples that we'll talk about in a minute. And then you'll have a supply of buildings that you'll be drawing from throughout the game. You're going to get 5 money to start off with, 5 victory points, and 1 of each resource that's available in the game. You'll select a start player who will get the start player card, and then you'll begin. Everyone's also going to get a hand of 5 cards out of the deck. On your turn, you can do one of 2 things. The first thing that you can do is to build a building. And the idea is you're going to be building buildings that are cards here, placing the cards here, and then placing the wooden buildings onto the board. So the way it would work is that you would select a card from your hand, and you would pay the cost associated with the card, which is in the top left of the card here. In this case, this quarry would be 3 money and 1 stone. So you'd pay those resources, and then you'd place the card here in front of you on the green area. Then you're going to take the building itself and you're going to place it onto the board. Let's take a look at how buildings are placed on the board and sort of how that all works. So when you place a building onto the board, the rule for the first building you place is that it has to be on the perimeter of the board somewhere on the edge. So you can place it right there, for example. Subsequent buildings that you build have to be placed adjacent to something that you've already put on the map, or it can go into the same space as the building that you've already played, provided that it's a different type of building. You can't have more than one of the same kind of building in a space. Now this can be useful if you want to build up multiple buildings into a space, because you might have cards that will give you special resources or abilities or victory points based upon the number of buildings you have in a particular location. So it's entirely up to you. You just want to sort of build it based upon the strategy of the cards that you have. So that is pretty much how you place buildings. So after you've placed your building onto the board, you're then going to look at the special ability that's on the bottom of the card, and you'll perform that ability. This one says that if you'll choose a mountain region with one of your production buildings in it, and you'll earn 1 stone for each building that's in this location. So I told you that you could put multiple buildings into a location as long as they were different kinds of buildings. So this is a way that you could get multiple stone based upon this ability. Now, that would be the end of your turn. On a later turn, though, you might build another green building. And if you did that, you would pay the cost, put the building onto the board, and then you put this card down here. Now you have 2 abilities showing. What you'll do then is you're going to start at the bottom and perform this ability again, and then perform the ability on the card that you just built. So So over the course of the game, you're going to be building these stacks of cards and sort of a cascade of abilities where you'll perform the one on the bottom, and then you'll perform all of the abilities every time that you build a building. So the ones that you build first could be very valuable because you get to do those multiple times during the game. Now, the other kind of building that I didn't mention is the temple, and that's where this little notch comes in here. All temples are for end of game scoring, and they each cost 1 of each resource, and they're going to give you up to 12 victory points depending on what it is. For example, this temple says that at the end of the game, you'll get 4 victory points for every field that you occupy, every yellow region, up to a maximum of 12. So the very first one that you play is going to go in this little notch here, but then there's another requirement after you build the first temple. The next temple that you would build, you would also have to spend 1 of each resource, but then you also have to have 1 card of every color to be able to play this temple. And if you were to play a third temple, you would need 2 cards of every color on your tableau to be able to build that temple. This keeps you from building all the temples at the very beginning of the game, which is important because these are the temple icons that you're going to put on the board when you build the temple. And it's going to go into a location that already has one of your colored buildings. And there's a fixed number of these, and this is sort of a trigger for the end game. Once the last one of these has been placed onto the board, then you play an equal number of rounds, and then that'll be the end of the game. So you'll be building those slowly over time for end game scoring. Now, but you might find that rather than building buildings, you might find that you don't have all the resources that you need, or you don't have all the money that you need, or you don't have all the cards that you need to be able to do what you want. Or maybe your buildings are gone, you want to build one of those and you can't. So what you would do then is to make an offering to the gods instead on your turn, and that would allow you to get certain resources. The way it's going to work is that you're going to select a color card out of your hand for the ability that you want to do. For example, for the green cards we've been talking about here, for every card that you discard, you're going to get 1 resource of your choice. So if you're low on resources, that's a really good one to do. But the trick is you only have to have 1 green card to be able to perform this ability. And then you will select a number of total cards to discard, and you'll be able to perform the ability that many times. So in this case, let's say I discard all 4 of these cards, and the top one is green. Well, now I can do that green ability 4 times and get 4 resources of my choice. I'll discard those cards, and I'll get to draw back up to 5. So I get 4 more cards and draw back up to 5. Also, the third thing you get to do is you get to take a production building from your pile here and put it back into your supply. So this is the way that you're going to get buildings back into your supply for the most part. So these are pretty powerful abilities, and it's also really the only way that you're going to be able to draw back up to 5 cards on your turn, because when you build a building, you don't draw back up to 5 cards unless you have no cards in your hand, and then you'll draw back up to 5. So this is a good way to replenish your hand. The blue buildings will give you money, 2 coins for every card that you discard. The green will give you 1 resource. The yellow cards will allow you to get additional cards. So you'll draw back up to 5, and then you'll get another card for every card that you've discarded. So you can end up with up to 10 cards in your hand. The brown buildings or orange buildings will give you victory points. If you discard 1 card, you'll get 1 victory point, or if you discard more than 1, you'll get 2 victory points. And if you're really low on production buildings, if you invoke the powers with the military cards, for every card that you discard, you can take 1 of these buildings and put it back into your supply. So that's a way you get multiple types of buildings with one go by doing that. Additionally, the temple cards will count as wild cards. So if you put that on top of your stack of cards that you're discarding, you can perform any of these actions. So that's the way that you can sort of cycle through cards, get resources, get money, get the things that you need to be able to build the buildings that you want. So those are the 2 things you can do on your turn. You can build a building, or you can invoke the powers of the gods by making an offering. So let's take a look a little bit, go back to the board for a second and talk about those barbarian encampments, and then that'll sort of wrap up our look at Deus. So let's come back to the board here and take a look at these barbarian villages and figure out how we get the points from those. So the idea is that you're trying to surround these barbarian villages and have the most military strength to be able to claim the victory points. So the moment that a building is placed and a barbarian village is surrounded, you're going to stop and take a look at how much military is present. It's a very Euro-ish sort of resolution of battle. So the idea here is that I place this guy here, and so then you look at military units. I have 2 green military here. Orange has 1 military. 2 beats 1, and so green was going to get the victory points from that village. Now, what if there's a tie? Well, let's say, for example, that this guy wasn't there, and I place this one here, and so now there's a 1-to-1 tie for military. Well, then you're going to look at the total number of buildings that have been built around the village. So 1, 2, 3 for green, 1, 2, 3, 4 for orange. Orange is actually going to win this one and is going to get the victory there. If there's a tie after that, then you'll just split them. Now this is very important because this is another end game condition in that the moment that all of the barbarian villages have been surrounded on the board, that's going to trigger the end game as well. I mentioned the temples would be one way of triggering the end game. This is the other way. And then you'll play an equal number of turns, then you'll do your final scoring. Final scoring is going to consist of whatever of these tokens you already have in front of you from maybe villages or from other things that you've gotten during the game. And then you're going to look at the temple cards that you have. So any of those that you have in front of you on your tableau, you're going to look at those and get the victory points that are yielded from those temple cards. And then you're going to look at each resource type, all 4 of the little resource discs here, and money will also count as a resource. Whoever has the most of each one of these type of resources is going to get 2 victory points. And if there's a tie, then both players will get those victory points. But whoever has the majority in each of those resources is going to get 2 points each. You'll add up all the points, and whoever has the most points is the winner of Deus. Now I think that this game draws some very close comparisons to other games like Glory to Rome and Bruges that use cards in multiple ways. And I think that's one of the most interesting parts of this game is having to take what's in your hand and figure out on a turn-by-turn basis, what are you going to do with your cards? And sometimes the hand that you have is going to be great and you have all the things that you need to be able to do the things that you want and play the cards that you want. But more often than not, you're not going to have everything that you need. And you're going to have to leverage invoking those god powers to be able to get more resources, more money, and more cards. And so I think that's one of the interesting things in this game is trying to just make the best of what you have and make very tactical decisions about how to maximize your points. The games that I played of this so far, everyone sort of sits at the table and hates their hand and they're trying to figure out what am I going to do with this stuff? This isn't really what I need. But that's actually the fun of the game is sort of trying to figure that out. So I think this is a really great game. And I think it's one that is right in that middleweight Euro category. So it's not a light game by any means. As a matter of fact, I sort of found that it takes about a half game for people to really sort of figure out what's going on, at least the groups that I played with. But by that second play, everybody sort of is aware of all the things that you need to do and the strategies that you can employ. And they've also seen most of the cards that are in the deck, and that helps as well. So it's a lot of fun. It's a good thinky experience, but at the same time, it's an easy game to teach because on your turn, you really have only one of 2 different choices to make: build a building or invoke the god powers. So teaching the game is very easy, but then there's a lot of complexity built in of how you're going to do that. The fact that the board is modular and double-sided things and the variety of the cards means that you're going to get a different play experience every time, which I think is a lot of fun. Now, I did mention in the intro about the poor choices of colors and graphic design. And so I do want to speak to that for a second because I feel like the gameplay is great and the design is great, but I think they made some really just not very good choices. I don't really particularly like the rounded off hexes that the board consists of. It just doesn't look like a map to me. It looks very abstracted, and it's abstract to begin with, but it would have been cool if there'd been some sort of a cohesion to it where it makes it look more like an actual map. Also, the way that they chose colors in this game was very strange. Lots of pastels, and then the pastel colors don't really even match what the cards say. So all the military cards say that they're red, they're obviously pink. All of the cards that look to me to be orange, they all refer to as being brown. So if you have colorblind folks in your group, I have several in my game group, that might end up being a little bit of a problem. But that's just kind of a minor point as far as the components of the game. Oh, and of course there's that thing with the wood resource, the token being brown, and then the icon on the card being green. That's just way off. So I was hoping that they maybe would have fixed that in the US edition, but maybe a future reprint. These are all minor points, though. I think it's a really great game. The design is excellent. I would even predict that this is probably going to be a nominee for the Kenner Spiel des Jahres this year. I think it's just the right weight for that. It's a gamer's game, but it's very easy to teach, and so I think it fits that category pretty well. So that's my prediction. We'll see if that comes true or not. Anyway, it's a great game, and I would definitely check it out if you like games of this style. Deus.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.